September 22nd. The Marquis had sprung a large leak, for want of good caulking at first in Gorgona. I went aboard with our carpenter, who assisted theirs, and with a piece of lead nailed over the leak, being in the water's edge, soon stopped it, and we made sail again in little time. Wind at south by east. We had a good observation. North latitude 6° 9'. Every day as we leave the equinoctial more distant, the heat increases very much. October 1st. Yesterday we made the main land of Mexico. It bore northeast distant about 10 leagues. We hoisted out our yawl, and fetched aboard Captain Cook and his lieutenant Mr. Pope, Captain Courtney and Captain Dampier. The latter says he knows this high land, but the latter directs us all to know it. Captain Dampier, near this place, 5 years past, met the Manila ship in the St. George, and had a fight at a distance, but he says for want of men could not board her, and after a short dispute was forced to let her alone. We hauled off the shore west-northwest, not caring to be near enough to be seen from the land to alarm the coast too soon. We had often showers of rain, wind at south-southeast. October 2nd. Most part of this 24 hours we had squalls and then little wind at south-southeast, intermixed with sultry hot weather. Our men began to be unhealthy again, having lately dropped down on the deck, but after bleeding came pretty well to themselves. We agreed with our consort to lie by from 8 at night till daybreak. At noon it cleared up, and we saw the land, at least 8 leagues off, though we seemed just under it, it was so very high. We made Cape Corrientes, bearing northeast about 8 leagues, by which we judge according to our observation at noon, that it lies in latitude 20° 10' north. We know it to be Cape Corrientes, because we could see no land to the northward of it, and that it was a headland. Captain Dampier has been here also, but it's a long time ago. We all agreed it was the Cape, and that we had best haul off northwest to look for the islands Tres Marias, which are not far from this Cape, but we are not certain of their situation. October 4th. Yesterday afternoon at 4 the Cape bore east-northeast about 10 leagues. We kept on under an easy sail all night. In the morning we saw 2 islands, being very clear weather, at least 14 leagues distant, one bearing north by west and the other north by east. At noon we had a good observation, latitude 20° 45' north. Though our men have their fill of land and sea turtle, which keeps them from the scurvy, yet I find them weak, it being but a faintly food, except they had sufficient bread or flour with it, they having but 1 1/4 pound of bread or flour for 5 men a day, to prolong our stock of bread against we come to live wholly on our salt provisions, and then must be forced to allow more. October 6th. In the morning we sent Lieutenant Fry in the pinnace ashore on the eastermost island, to try whether there was any good road or convenience for us to recruit there. At 9 they returned, and told me the island had foul ground near half a mile from the shore, bad anchoring, worse landing, and no fresh water, but wood enough. A melancholy story, our water growing short. We hauled on a wind for the middle island, which Captain Dampier, I do believe, can remember he was at, when he belonged to Captain Swan and found water. Being little wind, we sent our boat towards the island to view it before we could get thither with the ship. October 7th. The Dutchess's people and our pinnace had been ashore at several places on the southeast side of the island, and found bitter water at every place. Our ship got soon to an anchor near the Dutchess, in 11 fathom water and sandy ground, about 1.5 miles off shore. October 8th. Those that had been on the island saw no sign of people's being lately there, but found a human skull above ground, which we suppose to have been one of the 2 Indians Captain Dampier tells us were left here by Captain Swan about 23 years ago. For victuals being scarce with these buccaneers, they would not carry the poor Indians any farther, but, after they had served their turns, left them to make a miserable end on a desolate island. We kept a light out all night, and a great fire in the island, that if the Marquis and bark, who had left the company, saw it, and had a gale, they might come into anchor ground. But having no sight of them at daybreak, I went on board our consort, and proposed my going out to look after 'em; but they made light of it, and thought it needless, believing they would be in after us without any assistance. The recruit of cattle, hogs, and plantains at Tecames held to the Galapagos, and we have fed on turtle we got there ever since, excepting these last 2 days. This accidental stock of fresh food has been some refreshment to our men, and prolongs our stock of European Provisions. Now bread or flour will be the first thing wanting. We had little wind northerly, and often calm. October 9. Yesterday I sent Lieutenant Glendall to view the other side of the Island, and he brought me back word it was much better than this, with sandy bays and signs of turtle in the sand, which he believed came ashore the last night. I sent back the boat and men to try to get turtle, and this morning they came back with their boat's load of very good ones, and left another lading behind them ready turned. They also had found indifferent good water on the northeast side of the Island, which rejoiced us to be so unexpectedly supplied; for the other water on this side the Island had purged those that drank it aboard the Dutchess like physic. We had no sight yet of the bark or Marquiss. 'Tis very hot, with an air of wind northerly, but almost calm. Our consort has sent their pinnace in quest of the missing ships. October 10. Lieutenant Connolly of the Dutchess that went in quest of 'em returned without any news. And we having begun trimming our ship and stripping the rigging, the Dutchess desired to go and look for them, meanwhile we were to employ our people to cut wood and get a stock of turtle against their return. We found an excellent run of water on the other side of the Island, and sent our pinnace to view the westermost Island, to see if either of the missing ships had got into anchor there. Captain Dover being willing to remove aboard the Dutchess, I desired our officers to make the following Memorandum. Tres S. Maria Islands. We, the underwritten, appointed part of a committee now present on board the Duke, do certify that Captain Dover requested to go on board the Dutchess, and desired us to take notice it was his own choice to do so. Witness our hands, this 10th day of October 1709. Stephen Courtney, Woodes Rogers, William Dampier, Robert Fry, Thomas Glendall, Lancelot Appleby. At the same time the following agreement was made where to meet with the Dutchess, and they took a copy with them. In case we aboard the Duke don't see the Dutchess return in 10 days, then to be ready to sail, and first look in the latitude 20° north in sight of the land; if not to be found there, to run off the land farther into sea, and then in sight again, but no nearer than within 6 leagues of the land, to prevent discovery. We are to bring all full of water and turtle for a second recruit, to keep a continual lookout for them, and leave a signal at the south end of this Island. October 11. According to this agreement, Captain Dover went himself, and sent his servant with his necessaries aboard the Dutchess. In the evening they came to sail, and carried above 100 large turtle that we brought to them in our boats for victualling, to save salt provisions. We hope the current, that has hitherto run to leeward, will quickly shift, and facilitate their return, that we may not be obliged to follow them. I ordered 6 yards of red and white baize to be joined together, to spread it as a signal on the Island for directing them to a letter from me in a bottle by it, should we unexpectedly quit the place in her absence. October 12. Last night our pinnace, which had been in quest of the missing ships, returned from the westermost Island, and saw no sign of the ships. Our people tell us they heard aboard the Dutchess that the bark had not 2 days water when they left them, which made me very uneasy lest she should go to the main after water, which would discover us, and might prove the occasion of losing her also. Yesterday we put negroes ashore to cut wood for the absent ships, and last night our boat came off, and brought but 3 out of 10, 7 having run away into the woods. Immediately we dispatched several men round the Island with arms, to endeavour to catch 'em when they come down out of the woods to get food at the seaside. These negroes had an antipathy against Michael Kendall, the Jamaica negro, and designed to have him killed, had not one of those that came aboard given him timely notice of it. A negro amongst the runaways could write well, which made me get our ransomers to write 3 Spanish papers of encouragement to incite the fugitives upon sight of 'em to return, promising that negro his freedom and everything else he or the rest of them could reasonably desire. These papers we nailed up against trees by the brookside, where they will be sure to see them. My reason for so doing was to prevent these fellows from giving notice of us on the coast, if they reached the main on bark logs, which they could make with the hatchets they had to cut wood for us. If this method fails of success, 'tis in vain to hope for finding them by searching the island, every part of it being full of thick woods and prickles, which make it unpassable. On the sandy shore we began to employ our rope makers to spin twine for the Dutchess and Marquise, who complain their stock is short. Our people found another spring of excellent water on the other side of the island. October 13. Yesterday afternoon the Dutchess came in sight with the bark in tow, and soon after we saw the Marquise. We kept a light out that they might the better find us. In the morning we saw them at anchor between the two islands. I weighed in their sight, and put out our ensign for them to follow us to the watering place on the other side of the island, which they did accordingly. The wind continues northerly, with a lee current. October 14. Yesterday in the afternoon we came to an anchor in 16 fathom water off the northeast side of the island. I went immediately in our pinnace aboard the Dutchess, that was then under sail with the bark in tow, 2 leagues from us. About 4 they and the Marquise came to an anchor. I told them of our negroes deserting us, which had prevented our getting a good stock of wood in their absence, and we agreed to keep all our negroes on board the ships, and narrowly watch them to prevent their desertion for the future. Mr. Duck, who was the master of the bark, told me the day they lost sight of us, their water was expended, and 2 of the bark's crew in a very small canoe left her almost out of sight of land, and being smooth calm weather, fortunately had got aboard the Marquise to acquaint Captain Cook they had no water, upon which he bore down to them and took her in tow. Had he not done this, the bark must have run for the mainland to get water, which might have alarmed the enemy, and endangered the loss of the vessel and men. They were not above 8 leagues off the island, but it being hazy weather and having little wind and a lee current, they could not get in or see us. October 15. We could not get to the watering place near the northwest corner of the island till 7 last night, when we anchored in 7 fathom water, clean sandy ground, about half a mile from the shore. The westernmost point bore west by north about 3 miles, and the eastermost east by south 6 miles. The body of the westernmost island bore northwest distant 4 leagues. This morning we got our empty casks ashore and began filling water. Had we not very fair weather at this season, and little wind, this place would be but an ordinary road. October 16. Captain Courtney sent me word that the Marquise, who has been again missing, was well moored at the southeast side of the island, and could not easily turn it hither, so we agreed she should lie there, and we would water her from hence with our boats. October 18. Lieutenant Fry went in the pinnace last night to view the weather island, and he returned this morning, and told me there was a road, but not very good, and that he could find no water. October 19. We hauled the seine, and caught some fish. This morning we found some bale goods damaged, which we believe they received before we had 'em, and we unpacked and dried 'em, and sold what was most damaged amongst the ship's company, repacking and stowing away the rest. Very hot weather, and a little air of wind north. October 23. We began this morning to take aboard our Turtle and the remainder of our wood and water, designing in the evening to return and anchor on the southeast side of the island, to join the Marquise, and to agree on a station to cruise for the Manila ship. Our men shot a snake ashore, and brought it aboard dead. I saw it measured 15 inches round, and near 10 foot long, some of 'em are much longer. This was of a hazel colour, spotted, called by the Spaniards here a leopard serpent. October 24. All the officers met aboard the Dutchess, and signed a duplicate of every conclusion in all committees since we have been in these seas. Many of the resolutions wrote aboard this ship were in my custody, and others wrote aboard the Dutchess in Captain Courtney's, but it was thought advisable that each of us should have all the copies signed alike. While we were together, we agreed on a station to lie for the Manila ship, but I lately proposed parting, and to meet again at Cape Corrientes, or any other appointed station, and for us in the Duke to cruise off the same place where Captain Dampier met the Manila ship in the St. George, or else the Marquise and Dutchess to take that station, and I would go to Cape St. Lucas, since by either method we would have 2 chances for the prize, and get provisions, which we begin to want very much. This method might prove better than to be at one place where we could not be supplied with provisions. But the officers of the Dutchess and Marquise seemed unwilling to part companies, and the majority thinking Cape St. Lucas the prosperous place to lie for the Manila ship bound for Acapulco, I drew up our resolution, which was signed by the whole council, who on this occasion were all together. At a committee held on board the Dutchess at the Islands Tres Marias, October 24th, 1709. We whose names are hereunto subscribed, being members of a committee appointed to manage the affairs of the Duke, Duchess, and Marquise, having recruited our ships at these islands, and being in a readiness to put to sea again, we have examined the opinion of Captain Dampier, appointed pilot by the owners of the ships Duke and Duchess in Bristol, and have been well informed from all the intelligences we have frequently had from prisoners since our being in the South Seas, and do now finally determine to cruise off Cape St. Lucas, the southernmost cape of California, in such methods and with such signals to each other as shall be agreed on in our next committee. We resolve with the utmost care and diligence to wait here the coming of the Manila ship belonging to the Spaniards and bound for Acapulco, whose wealth on board her we hope will prompt every man to use his utmost conduct and bravery to conquer. This is our opinion the day above. Thomas Dover, President, Woodes Rogers, Stephen Courtney, Edward Cook, William Dampier, Robert Fry, William Stratton, Charles Pope, John Connolly, William Bath, Thomas Glendall, George Milburn, Robert Nolman, John Bridge, John Ballett, Lancelot Appleby. Being all supplied with wood, water, and turtle, we came to sail at 11 this forenoon, wind at north by west, a fine gale. But ere I proceed with my journal, I will give a short description of these islands. The islands of Tres Marias lie northwest in a range at equal distances from each other, about 4 leagues asunder. The largest island is the westernmost, appears to be high double land, and about 5 leagues in length. The middle island about 3 leagues the longest way, and the easternmost scarce 2 leagues. These are also middling high lands, and full of trees. Near the least island are 2 or 3 small broken white islands. One of the outermost of these appeared so much like a ship under sail at a distance, that we gave the usual signal for a chase, but soon found our mistake. These islands have abundance of different sorts of parrots, pigeons, doves, and other land birds, of which we killed great numbers, with excellent hares, but much less than ours. We saw abundance of goannas and some raccoons; the latter barked and snarled at us like dogs, but were easily beat off with sticks. I think the water more worthy of remark than anything we saw here, because we found but 2 good springs, which ran down in large streams near others, that were very bitter and disagreeable, which I suppose might proceed from shrubs and roots that grow in the water, or from some mineral. The turtle here is very good, but of a different shape from any I have seen; and though vulgarly there's reckoned but 3 sorts of turtle, we have seen 6 or 7 different sorts at several times, and our people have eat of them all, except the very large hooping or loggerhead turtle, as they are called, found in Brazil in great plenty, and some of 'em above 500 L weight. We did not eat of that sort, because then our provisions were plentiful, which made those turtles to be slighted as coarse and ordinary food. Those at the Galapagos Islands, both he's and she's, I observed came ashore in the daytime, and not in the night, quite different from what I have seen or heard of the rest. All that we caught in this island was by turning 'em in the night, and were she's which came ashore to lay their eggs, and bury them in the dry sand. One of these had at least 800 eggs in its belly, 150 of which were skinned and ready for laying at once. I could not imagine that turtle were 6 weeks in hatching, as some authors write, considering the sun makes the sand so very hot wherever these eggs are found, and instead of a shell they have nothing but a very thin film. In order therefore to be better informed, I ordered some of our men ashore to watch carefully for one, and suffer her to lay her eggs without disturbance, and to take good notice of the time and place. Accordingly they did so, and assured me they found the eggs addled in less than 12 hours, and in about 12 more they had young 'uns in 'em, completely shaped and alive. Had we stayed a little longer, I might have given myself and others a thorough satisfaction in this quick production of nature. From hence I am inclinable to credit the report of divers of our sailors, who assert, that where they have found eggs in the sand, and looked for 'em 3 days after in the same place, they found nothing but films. This shews that the young ones are hatched within that time. They assured me also that they had observed oftener than once that the young brood run out of the sand every day directly for the sea in great numbers, and quicker than the old ones. At this time here was little fish about the shores of this Island, and of the same sorts mentioned at other places in these Seas; but the plenty of Turtle at this time supplies that defect. We the chief Officers fed deliciously here, being scarce ever without Hares, Turtle doves, Pigeons, and Parrots of various sizes and Colours; many had white or red heads with tufts of Feathers on their Crowns. I wish 'twould hold, but 'tis vain to tantalize our selves. For we must soon fare otherwise, and take to our old Food of almost decay'd Salt Pork and Beef, which we must prize, and heartily wish we had more on't. We found good Anchor ground about this middle Island, and gradual Soundings from 20 to 4 Fathom Water close by the Shore. Between this and the least Island 'tis about the same depth; where we were between them I found no Shoal, but what was visible, as a Rock off the S.W. Point, and a Shoal off the N.E. Point of the same, with another at a greater distance from that Point off the least Island, but neither runs above half a mile from the Shore. I know no danger about them but what with care might be easily avoided. Where we rode we could see spots of high Land, which I suppose was the Continent joined by low Land between it; the Northermost bore N. by E. half East about 16 Leagues distance. I take it to be the Starboard entrance into the Gulf or Strait of California. The nearest Land to us bore E.N.E. about 12 Leagues, and the Southermost E.S.E. at least 17 Leagues, very high, which I believe is the next Headland to the Northward of Cape Corrientes. I had but 2 opportunities to see it just at Sun rising, because 'twas very hazy during our stay here, so that I might err in the distance; but the best Directions for these Islands is thus. We account the nearest bears N.N.W. from Cape Corrientes 28 Leagues, and that it lies in the Latitude 21° 15' N. and the Longitude 111° 40' W. from London. I return to my Journal. October 28. At 6 this Evening the Westermost Island bore E.N.E. 15 Leagues. The Wind has been very little and veerable, with a great Swell out of the Northwest. I sent our Yawl with a Lieutenant aboard the Dutchess and Marquiss, with whom we agreed to spread as we ran to the Northward, that the Acapulco Ship might not pass us, if they should arrive sooner than we expected. We agreed to be to the Leeward, the Marquiss to the Windward, and the Dutchess between us, and all to keep in sight of each other. I ordered our Surgeons and Mr. Vanbrugh to see the inside of the Physick Chest that Captain Dover left us, and take an inventory of what was in it. We saw no more of the Islands. October 29. Still easy Gales, and sometimes quite calm and extreme hot. We can hardly keep our ground against the Current, that runs strong to the Southward. We are in the same Latitude, and I judge about the same place we were 2 days ago. October 30. This morning one of our Negro Women cried out, and was delivered of a Girl of a tawny Colour. Mr. Wassa, our chief Surgeon, was forced to discharge the Office of a Midwife in a close Cabin provided for that purpose. But what we most wanted was good Liquor, to keep up, or imitate the Women's laudable Custom of a refreshing Cup on such an occasion. I accidentally found a Bottle of thick strong Peru Wine, a good part of which was given to the sick Woman, who desired more than we could spare her. She had not been full 6 months amongst us, so that the Child could belong to none of our Company. But to prevent the other she Negro, called Daphne, from being debauched in our Ship, I gave her a strict charge to be modest, with threats of severe punishment if she was found otherwise. One of the Dutchess's black Nymphs having transgressed this way, was lately whipped at the Capstan. This I mention to satisfy the censorious, that we don't countenance lewdness, and that we took those women aboard, only because they spoke English, and begged to be admitted for laundresses, cooks, and sempstresses. November 1. This day we saw high Land, being the Point of California. By noon the Westermost in sight bore West by N. 8 Leagues, and the Northermost N.half West about 10 Leagues. We had an Observation, Latitude 22° 55', Longitude 113° 38' West from London. November 2. The Westermost Land we set yesterday noon, we make to be Cape St. Lucas, the southernmost headland of California. We agreed on signals and stations, and to spread southwest into the sea, off of this cape that now bore north by west from us. November 3. Our stations being concluded, I was to be the outermost ship, the Dutchess in the middle, and the Marquis next to the land, with the bark to ply and carry advice from ship to ship. The nearest ship to be 6 leagues at least, and 9 at most from the land. By this agreement we could spread 15 leagues, and see anything that might pass us in the day within 20 leagues of the shore. And to prevent the ships passing in the night, we were to ply to windward all day, and drive at night. Whilst we were together, we at last settled the form of our agreement for each ship, that all the ship companies might sign it, for every one to give account of all plunder he has received, that he may be charged with what's more than his share, and those, now or for the future suspected or accused of concealment, when demanded shall give their oaths before the commanders to the truth of their accounts, and if any one was found to conceal above the value of half a piece of 8, he is to be severely punished and fined 20 times its value. This we did to deter every one from fraudulent practices, which if we should happily take this ship, might also prevent disorders. November 4. I ordered a sailor into irons for threatening the cooper, and one Peter Clark, an ill abusive fellow, I ordered to have the like punishment, because he had wished himself aboard a pirate, and said he should be glad that an enemy, who could overpower us, was alongside of us. November 5. Yesterday in the afternoon, the Dutchess being near, I sent our yawl aboard with Lieutenant Glendall to agree more exactly on some remarkable land, that each of us knowing the same landmark might the better keep our stations. We agreed also that the Marquis should now be in the middle, and the Dutchess next the shore, as being the properest stations. This morning we put all manner of lumber and chests down, designing to keep all as clear as possible, that we might not be in a hurry if near the Acapulco ship. November 6. This day ended our stock of turtle we had at the Marias. Being all shees, with eggs in them, they would not keep so long as those we had at the Galapagos Islands. We have for some days thrown more dead turtle overboard than we killed for eating. November 7. Yesterday I went aboard the Marquis, and desired them to tell Captain Courtney when he came off the shore that we would take the inner berth, and exchange again for the same number of days, that we might have equal chances for seeing the Manila ship, because I now think the inner berth the likeliest. Sir Thomas Cavendish, in Queen Elizabeth's time, took the Manila ship in this place on the 4th of November. November 12th. Yesterday afternoon all our ship's company signed the before-mentioned agreement, finally to settle plunder. At the same time we signed another agreement to prevent gaming and wagering, some of our crews having already lost most of their clothes and what else they could make away with. To prevent those loose and dissolute courses, we signed both agreements as follows. We, the officers, seamen, and landmen belonging to the ship Duke, having made several former agreements concerning the equal sharing of plunder, do now desire and agree that each man give an exact account of all clothes, goods of value, or necessaries of any kind he has, over and above his dividend delivered him at Gorgona, or has purchased of others since, to be rightly charged to him in his account of plunder, by the agents appointed, and to restore whatever he has taken without the agent's knowledge, and to prevent any persons detaining and concealing any goods or riches of any kind, now or for the future, more than their respective shares, in order to a right distribution of plunder, except arms, chests, knives, Roman relics, scissors, tobacco, loose books, pictures and worthless tools and toys, and bedding in use, which are not included in this agreement. And those that have already only things of this kind are not liable to a penalty. We do voluntarily sign this, and offer ourselves to be obliged firmly by these presents, to be under the penalty of 20 shillings for every shilling of value taken, hid, or concealed, by any of us, or removed out of any prize without written orders from the commanders publicly, and that none but the agents already named, or to be named hereafter, shall detain in possession any plunder. But whatever is found concealed shall be valued, and the persons that hid it to be fined as aforesaid, which penalty we acknowledge to be laid on us by our own desire, content, and approbation, over and above the former penalty agreed on. That any person shall lose his share of every prize or purchase taken, whether cargo or plunder, that conceals of either the value of a half a piece of 8, and this to remain in force to the end of the voyage. And to encourage discoveries of such concealments, whatever person discovers the fraud of any, who shall be so imprudent as to detain more than his due, in any goods that has not been shared before as plunder, or purchased of the owners, agent, or commanders, the informer of such fraud shall have one half given him gratis, out of the offender's shares and wages, the other half for the use of the ship's company as plunder, which information shall be encouraged by the commanders of each ship in order to prevent frauds as long as this voyage holds. And that ever hereafter accounts shall be made up and the plunder immediately adjudged to prevent confusion. We likewise agree that if any of us hereafter shall without farther proof be accused of concealing plunder or goods of value belonging to any prize, he shall, on request before a committee of all or either of the ship's commanders and chief officers, voluntarily make affidavit to answer fully and satisfactorily to such questions as shall then and there be demanded of him, in order to prevent fraudulent concealments, and on his refusal agrees to be punished or degraded, and to be subject to such penalties as a general committee shall think fit to inflict on him or them. Every one hereunto subscribed is within 3 days from the date hereof to settle his account of plunder, after which time this instrument is in full force, and not before. Signed by the officers and men of each ship. The agreement to prevent gaming was as follows. We, the ship's company belonging to the ship Duke, now in the South Seas, being adventurers so far to improve our fortunes in a private man of war, under the command of Captain Woodes Rogers, who has a lawful commission from his Royal Highness Prince George of Denmark, and considering the apparent hazard of our lives in these remote parts, do mutually agree to prevent the growing evil now arising amongst us, occasioned by frequent gaming, wagering, and abetting at others' gaming, so that some by chance might thus too slightly get possession of what his fellow adventurers have dangerously and painfully earned. To prevent this intolerable abuse, we shall forbear and utterly detest all practices of this kind for the future during the whole voyage, till our safe arrival in Great Britain, where good laws of this kind take place. And designing effectually to confirm this our desire and agreement, we do jointly remit all sorts of notes of hand, contracts, bills, or obligations of any kind whatsoever, that shall any ways pass, directly or indirectly, signed by either of us after the Duke hereof, provided the sum in each note be for gaming, wagering, or abetting any way whatsoever by any of us. And to prevent our being misled for the future, all manner of obligations of this kind and for this consideration shall be wholly invalid and unlawful here and in Great Britain or Ireland. And thoroughly to secure this method we farther jointly agree, that no debt from this time forward shall be lawfully contracted from man to man amongst us unless by the commander's attestation, and entered on the ship's book, it shall appear done publicly and justly to prevent each other's frauds being connived at amongst us. And that none of us may fraudulently do ill things of this kind for the future, and make a pretence to ignorance, we have all publicly and voluntarily set our hands, desiring the true intent and meaning hereof may take place without the least evasion, it being, as we very well know, for our common interest and public good, that not one of us employed on this dangerous and remote undertaking might be so unhappy to arrive at his wished for country and habitation poor and dejected. And being thoroughly sensible of the necessity of this agreement, we have set our hands. Signed by all the officers and men in each ship in sight of California, November 11th, 1709. November 13th. The water being discolored, and we near the shore, we hove the lead, but found no ground. November 17th. Yesterday we sent the bark to look for water on the main, and this morning they returned, having seen wild Indians, who paddled to them on bark logs. They were fearful of coming near our people at first, but were soon prevailed with to accept a knife or two and some bays, for which they returned 2 bladders of water, a couple of live foxes, and a deer skin. Till now we thought the Spaniards had missionaries among those people, but they being quite naked, having no signs of European commodities, nor the least word of Spanish, we conclude that they are quite savage. We dispatched the bark and boat a second time with odd trifles, in hopes to get some refreshment from 'em. November 19th. Before sunset last night we could perceive our bark under the shore, and having little wind, she drove most part of the night, that she might be near us in the morning. We sent our pinnace and brought the men aboard, who told us that their new acquaintance were grown very familiar, but were the poorest wretches in nature, and had no manner of refreshment for us. They came freely aboard to eat some of our victuals, and by signs invited our men ashore. The Indians swam ashore in the water to guide the bark logs that our men were on, there being too much sea to land out of our boat. After they got safe on shore, the Indians led each of our men betwixt two of 'em up the bank, where there was an old naked gentleman with a deer skin spread on the ground, on which they kneeled before our people, who did the like and wiped the water off their faces, without a cloth. Those that led them from the water side took the same care of 'em for a quarter of a mile, and led them very slowly through a narrow path to their huts, where they found a dull musician rubbing two jagged sticks across each other, and humming to it, to divert and welcome their new guests. After the ceremonies were over, our people sat on the ground with 'em, ate broiled fish, and were attended back in the same manner, with the Indian music. The savages brought a sample of every thing they had, except their women, children, and arms, which we find are not common to strangers. Their knives made of shark's teeth, and a few other of their curiosities, our people brought aboard to me, which I have preserved to shew what shifts may be made. November 21. Last night we saw a fire ashore, which we interpreted to be a signal from the inhabitants, that they had got something extraordinary for us, and we wanting refreshments, sent our bark and boat this morning with one of our musicians, to shew that we could at least equal them in music. November 22. Our boat returned and brought an account that they had found a very good bay with a fresh water river, and that they saw near 500 Indians, who lived there in small huts, but had no recruit for us besides a little fish. They met them as customary, and piloted the bark to that place, which we suppose was the same that Sir Thomas Cavendish recruited at in Queen Elizabeth's time, anno 1588. November 23. Our main top gallant mast being broke, we got up another, but the rope breaking the mast fell down upon the deck amongst the men, but by God's providence hurt nobody. At 8 last night our ship sprung a leak, so that we were forced to keep one pump a-going. November 25. Captain Courtney came aboard in his yawl, and complained his stock of water was almost spent. I agreed with him to send in our pinnace and a bark to supply them with water. November 26. This morning our pinnace returned from shore, brought 3 barrels of water and 2 very large fish from the Indians, which served most of the ship's company. Those that came from the shore observed the Indians were not so friendly to our men as customary. November 27. They refused to let them come ashore after it was night, which could not be to prevent their thieving, because the miserable wretches had nothing to lose. Yet they are jealous to keep what they have, and though they make no use of their land, might be afraid of rivals. November 28. Yesterday in the afternoon we heard the Marquis fire a gun, which was answered by the Dutchess, who had the middle berth. We tacked immediately, and made all possible sail, supposing they had seen a stranger. The Marquis stood to us towards the shore, and we soon met her. By 4 o'clock I was aboard them, and inquiring into the cause of the alarm, and was surprised to hear they took us for the Manila ship. And the gun they fired was to alarm the Dutchess to give chase, as she had done all the day, though not regarded by us, who knew the Marquis, and admired they could mistake the Duke. Immediately each ship returned to his station. Soon after our main tie gave way, and our main yard came down at once, but did no other damage. This morning we saw the bark coming off shore, where she had been becalmed. Being longer wanting than usual, we were afraid they were cut off by the Indians. We got our bale goods up from abaft to see for the leak, but all to no purpose. We found some of the bales that had received old damages, which we dried and repacked, and sold what was damaged among the ship's company. November 29. Last night our lazaretto door being broke open, and losing bread and sugar, this morning I ordered a search, and found the thief. I blamed the steward for his reminiscences. He told me he lay next the door, with the key fastened to his privy parts, because he had it once stolen out of his pocket, I suppose by the same thief, who was so dexterous to get it now without disturbing him, but not being ingenious enough to fasten it to the same place, he was discovered. His messmate was also guilty, but knowing his friends in Bristol, I was unwilling to punish him, Though provisions being scarce, it makes the Crime the greater, for we expect no Recruit till we get to the East Indies. I order'd the first to be severely whipp'd at the Gears, and the other and a Dutchman to be afterwards left with him in irons. December 9. Mr. Duck, the Master of the Bark, came aboard and presented me with some Dolphins he had from the Indians. I order'd our Master to go with him, and endeavour, if possible, to discover the shore along to the Northward, to find out a better Harbour than that where the Indians lived, and if they met with the Dutchess, to tell Captain Courtney I thought it convenient for one of the Ships to go into the Bay we had already discovered, and there to take in Water and Wood, &c. so to fit our Ships by turns, to save time, and consequently Provisions, which begin to grow short with us. We were now something dubious of seeing the Manila Ship, because it's near a month after the time they generally fall in with this Coast. December 14. Yesterday I went aboard the Dutchess, where 'twas agreed the Marquis should go into the Harbour and refit with all manner of dispatch. In the meantime we to keep the outer Berth, and the Dutchess to be betwixt us and the shore, and to cruise but 8 days longer, without we had a prospect of the Manila Ship, because our Provisions grow short. December 20. Having compared our stock of bread, and of what would serve to prolong it, we agreed that a committee should be held, and that every one should give his opinion in writing, whether we should attempt taking a town to victual us, and so continue the cruise for some time longer, or to make all possible dispatch to refit, and sail hence for the Island Guam, one of the Ladrones, and there if possible to get a fresh Recruit. My opinion was as follows. On board the ship Duke, cruising off Cape St. Lucas in California, this 19th of December, 1709. 8 days ago I was with Captains Courtney and Cook, and computed what bread there might be left aboard the 3 ships, and we all agreed there might be 64 days bread of all sorts for each ship when equally divided. Since which time there is 8 days spent, so that there should be left no more than 56 days bread. But on a rummage of both ships, Duke and Dutchess, and strictly computing everything that will help prolong our bread, we hope to make 14 days more bread, which may be in all 70 days bread to come. We must expect before we can get fitted hence to spend at least 9 days, and add to that our passage to Guam, which we can't think will be less than 50 days, is 59 days bread. By this account, which is the utmost, 11 days bread will be left when we come to Guam. I am of opinion, now we have searched each other's ships to prevent frauds, that there can be no more than 11 days bread left when we come to Guam, as above, except we shorten our allowance very much, which we can't do till driven to the last extremity, our allowance being very small already. But if we should have an unexpected long passage from hence to Guam, it will go hard with us at the present allowance, besides we are not certain of a Recruit at Guam. By the foregoing account, it's plain what flour and bread kind we have left, and the risk we must now run to get to the East Indies with so mean a stock. This I doubt not will be full satisfaction to our employers, that we have prolonged our cruise to the utmost extent, in hopes to meet the rich Manila Ship. But since fortune has not favour'd us, we must think of other methods to promote our safety and interest. Except we resolve to take a town here to victual us, 'tis evident we can't cruise, and 'tis my opinion that now our time is so far spent, we ought to attempt nothing more in these seas, lest our too long stay might be the loss of all, because the worm has already entered our sheathing. For these and other reasons I think it highly necessary that from this instant we make all manner of dispatch to fit and sail hence for the Island of Guam, one of the Ladrones Islands, and there if possible to get a fresh Recruit, and consult how further to proceed for the interest of our employers, and our own advantage and reputation. This I give as my opinion aboard the Dutchess, this 20th of December, 1709. Woodes Rogers. This my opinion being perused with the rest, we came to the following resolve. We the officers present in a committee on board the Dutchess, having farther considered our short store of bread and bread kind, and finding it too little to continue our cruise longer here for the Manila Ship, do therefore now agree to get a harbour, and there to recruit with the utmost dispatch, and sail for the Island of Guam, or any other place where we can revictual. We design to consult farther of our next proceedings when in harbour. This is our present opinion. Witness our hands this 20th day of December, 1709. Signed by the officers of the committee. At signing this in the committee we all looked very melancholy and dispirited, because so low in provisions, that if we should not reach Guam in the limited time, or accidentally miss it, we shall not have enough till we arrive at any other place. Necessity forces us to design from hence to Guam, and thence to the East Indies, for if we had provisions to go back round Cape Horn, and to stop in Brazil, and there to sell our Europe prize goods, it might be much more for our advantage, and be sooner at Great Britain. December 21. Pursuant to yesterday's agreement, we made the best of our way into the harbour called by Sir Thomas Cavendish Port Segura, where the Marquis was refitting. But having calms most part of the afternoon, and a current sitting to leeward, we rather lost than got ground. Towards morning there sprung up a gale, and we found ourselves to leeward of the port, though we took all advantages of the wind. But to our great and joyful surprise, about 9 o'clock the man at masthead cried out he saw a sail besides the Dutchess and bark, bearing west half south of us, distant about 7 leagues. We immediately hoisted our ensign, and bore away after her. The Dutchess soon did the same, but it falling calm, I ordered the pinnace to be manned and armed, and sent her away to make what she was. Some were of the opinion 'twas the Marquis come out of the harbour, and to confirm this, said they could discern the sail to have no foretop mast. So the boat, being not out of call, returned back, and we put a cap in her for the Marquis, then set her away again, by which time it was noon. The Cape bore north-northeast of us, distant about 5 leagues. December 22. We had very little wind all yesterday afternoon, so that we neared the ship very slowly, and the boat not returning kept us in a languishing condition, and occasioned several wagers, whether 'twas the Marquis or the Acapulco ship. We kept sight of our boat, and could not perceive her to go aboard the ship, but made towards the Dutchess's pinnace, who was rowing to them. They lay together some time, then the Dutchess's boat went back to their ship again, and ours kept dogging the stranger, though at a good distance, which gave us great hopes that 'twas the Manila ship. I sent Mr. Fry aboard the Dutchess in our yawl to know what news, and if the ship was not the Marquis, to agree how to engage her. We then hoisted a French ensign, and fired a gun, which the stranger answered. Mr. Fry returned with joyful news that it was the ship we had so impatiently waited for, and despaired of seeing her. We agreed the 2 pinnaces should tend her all night, and keep showing false fires, that we might know whereabouts they and the chase was, and if we were so fortunate to come up with her together, agreed to board her at once. We made a clear ship before night, had everything in a readiness to engage her at daybreak, and kept a very good look out all night for the boat's false fires, which we saw and answered frequently. At daybreak we saw the chase upon our weather bow, about a league from us, the Dutchess ahead of her to leeward near about half as far. Towards 6 our boat came aboard, having kept very near the chase all night, and received no damage, but told us the Dutchess passed by her in the night, and she fired 2 shot at them, but they returned none. We had no wind, but got out 8 of our ship's oars, and rowed above an hour, then there sprung up a small breeze. I ordered a large kettle of chocolate to be made for our ship's company, having no spirituous liquor to give 'em. Then we went to prayers, and before we had concluded were disturbed by the enemy's firing at us. They had barrels hanging at each yard arm that looked like powder barrels, to deter us from boarding 'em. About 6 o'clock we began to engage her by ourselves, for the Dutchess being to leeward, and having little wind, did not come up. The enemy fired her stern chase upon us first, which we returned with our fore chase several times, till we came nearer, and when close aboard each other, we gave her several broadsides, plying our small arms very briskly, which they returned as thick a while, but did not ply their great guns half so fast as we. After some time we shot a little ahead of them, lay thwart her hawse close aboard, and plied them so warmly, that she soon struck her colours 2/3 down. By this time the Dutchess came up, and fired about 5 guns, with a volley of small shot, but the enemy having submitted, made no return. We sent our pinnace aboard, and brought the captain with the officers away, and having examined 'em, found there was another ship came out of Manila with 'em, of a bigger burthen, having about 40 brass guns mounted, and as many patereros; but they told us they lost her company 3 months ago, and reckoned she was got to Acapulco before this time, she sailing better than this ship. This prize was called by the long name of Nostra Senora de la Encarnacion Disengano, Sir John Pickerby, commander. She had 20 guns, 20 petereros, and 193 men aboard, whereof 9 were killed, 10 wounded, and several blown up and burnt with powder. We engaged 'em about 3 glasses, in which time we had only myself and another man wounded. I was shot through the left cheek, the bullet struck away great part of my upper jaw and several of my teeth, part of which dropped down upon the deck where I fell. The other, Will Powell, an Irish landman, was slightly wounded in the buttock. They did us no great damage in our rigging, but a shot disabled our mizzen mast. I was forced to write what I would say to prevent the loss of blood, and because of the pain I suffered by speaking. December 23. After we had put our Ships to rights again, we stood in for the Harbour, which bore North-East of us, distant about 7 Leagues. Our Surgeons went aboard the Prize to dress the wounded Men.